Hi everybody, I'm Martin Stout. This is my final project. Hope you enjoy it somewhat. So just a quick personal overview about me. I spent most of my early life living in South America. I was born in Peru. My mom's Peruvian, my dad was American. I grew up in Peru and later Bolivia, eventually permanently moving to the US when I was about 12. In terms of foundational values like right and wrong, these mostly originate from my family and my family's background. I was raised Catholic. Catholicism is huge in Peru. According to the most recent census, 76% of the country is Catholic. It's been on the decline in the past few decades, but it still holds a dominant cultural majority. Catholic beliefs and values played a large part in my early years. Christian values supported the general foundation of morals and cultural behavior throughout my childhood. Though religion and family were a constant as a kid, my mom grew pretty critical of the Catholic Church as I grew older. Catholicism kind of fell by the wayside in our household. This sort of violated some cultural norms in the Peruvian, culture or environment at the time. It wasn't a scandal or anything, just unusual, not common. Examining sort of this aspect of my upbringing for this project, I noticed this sort of criticism or skepticism of large cultural forces or institutions was pretty persistent through my process of value formation, and something I've definitely held on to for better or worse. As I've grown older, I've come to find that some traditional rights and wrongs can be subjective. Some things I was told were wrong according to Catholic values I've found not to be wrong at all and have become common in our culture. I tend to fall on the more progressive side of cultural things, so a lot of Catholic dogma doesn't really inform my values anymore. Many set values I grew up with have changed over time. The culture I came up in has sort of partly been replaced with a generally kinder and more accepting society. Growing up, like small example, growing up, drugs were forbidden, dangerous, a bad thing. Like weed was super legal. Now you can get it delivered to your house on your phone, and people talk about doing mushrooms and doing drugs pretty openly. This did not used to be the case. I remember. So over time, seeing things like this happen, I've found I have to sort of figure out my own right and wrong through interactions with people, learning to adapt and to aim for harmonious interactions with others. I have encountered personal values through friends, family, books, media, all sorts of messaging through, popular culture. There are certain behaviors and beliefs my family has that I didn't cling to. Some others I did, but over time have soured on. Some I hold on to, which I didn't. And many that I've taken on personally that don't, values that don't really carry across my whole family. I personally try to approach most interactions with an empathetic outlook. The old golden rule of treating others how you wish to be treated is one of those cultural beliefs or values I've found to be pretty valuable. I try my daily decisions. I try just to value other people's input and feelings and be mindful of my own perspective as well as the perspective of others. So, like I said earlier, dad was American, mom's Peruvian. I moved to the States permanently when I was 12. I spent a good chunk of time on the East Coast outside DC, also some time in North Carolina. I've lived in a few places, so I've had to adapt a few times, absorbing little bits of different cultures along the way. I'm an elder millennial in terms of the generation I fall into. Spanish was my first language. By now, I'm much more comfortable with English, but I still speak Spanish. I found I don't have a particularly deeply ingrained cultural identity. Spending that good chunk of my early life outside the country, there's some sort of American cultural cornerstones that didn't set with me. But over time, I've come to pretty much become mostly culturally American, but there are parts I don't identify with. In my research, there was a passage that stood out to me about how the mainstream majority of the culture you're in dictates dominant cultural interests. You're inevitably drawn into these, and that rang true for me. I kind of found that was my personal experience. American culture is and was at the time so dominant and influential throughout the world that the globalization of American culture has made a lot of American references be kind of go global. Through looking at material covering assimilation, I found this term bicultural, which I can sort of apply to myself, having feet on two different cultures, but not fully apart either. I'm definitely integrated into American culture. I still hold on to some Peruvian customs, and I take pride in my heritage. Peruvian food is wonderful. That's a national pride that a lot of people seem to jump on. I only visit Peru every few years, so though I have sort of these long-term connections through my mother's side of the family, who I'm pretty close with, I'm not directly connected to Peruvian culture, not on a day-to-day basis. This creates a gulf of being familiar with the culture I grew up with, but still somewhat removed. I can easily talk with my Peruvian family, which didn't used to be the case. The Peruvian infrastructure and globalization of video conferencing and technology making it easier to interact with others makes it a lot easier to visit parts of your culture without actually going. I look American. My Spanish accent's a little off. I can't pass as fully Peruvian. With the accent and everything, people can tell. I can definitely pass for fully American though. It's a little struggle getting people to believe I'm Peruvian when it first comes up. Even though many members of my Peruvian family look just like me, and Peruvians, come in all sorts of different ethnicities, shapes, sizes. People have a lot of people have like a very narrow idea of what a South American person looks like. This makes sort of social identity a little tricky. I've experienced few forms of, American cultural bias or stereotyping this way. Stereotypes people have about South Americans and Peruvians come into play. Usually, not always, but usually whenever a topic of my background comes up. I found some Americans lack a general knowledge of cultures outside the U.S. It's not necessarily hostile. It just seems some Americans lack a sense of motivation or knowledge to expand their culture quotient. In this way, my personal cultural background has at times clashed or not fully melded with broader American cultural experiences. In terms of Peruvian society and the time I've spent in it, as opposed to here, Peruvian society has a much more clearly marked in-group and out-group. Pretty much adheres to racial boundaries. The indigenous population is the majority and scattered all over through the country. It's somewhat held down socially and economically by the European descended population, a visible remnant of the days of Spanish colonization. The social aspects of Catholicism play a large part in Peruvian family culture and our family's culture. Being a godparent is a pretty big deal in Peruvian culture. You're expected to have a role in that kid's life if you have a godson or goddaughter. Interfamily relationships are much more close and tight-knit in sort of South American or Peruvian culture. My Peruvian family is tight-knit. Many of my cousins have moved back into their parents' homes with their families to maintain a social unit. And a lot of my cousins stayed in their parents' home well into their 20s and early 30s before they married. It's not unusual there. It's pretty common for you to just stay in your parents' house until you get married. So in conclusion, through this class, I've learned to appreciate a more zoomed out perspective on culture, to realize everyone has their own biases and experiences that inform their interactions with others. I've been lucky enough to be exposed to a decent amount of intercultural interactions. So it's always good to practice that and hear new perspectives and ways of interacting with others that hold a more objective agenda. Thanks for watching. Have a good summer, everybody.